How to win friends and influence people. We are taught from a young age that success is the result of hard skills. We believe that if we solve the hardest math equations or memorize the most medical terms, the world will beat a path to our door. But the reality of the marketplace and the reality of the living room are quite different. Technical ability is merely the entry fee. The real game is played in the arena of human engineering. Whether you are leading a corporation, managing a household, or trying to get a refund from a stubborn clerk, your success depends almost entirely on your ability to handle the delicate, explosive, and fascinating creature known as the human being. Before we dive into the fundamental techniques of handling people, I have a simple question for you. When was the last time you criticized someone, a partner, a colleague, or a child, and they genuinely thanked you for it? Leave a comment below with your story. Part 1. Fundamental Techniques in Handling People. Chapter 1. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. On May 7, 1931, New York City witnessed one of the most sensational manhunts in its history. Two-Gun Crowley, a cop killer and a gunman who didn't smoke or drink, was trapped in his sweetheart's apartment. 150 policemen besieged his hideaway, pouring lead into the room. When they finally captured him, the police commissioner declared him one of the most dangerous criminals in the history of New York. He said Crowley would kill at the drop of a feather. But how did Crowley see himself? While the police were firing into the apartment, he wrote a letter addressed "To whom it may concern." In it he wrote, "Under my coat is a weary heart, but a kind one that would do nobody any harm." This is the paradox of human nature. A man who was shooting at police officers regarded himself as a person with a kind heart. Al Capone, America's most notorious public enemy, said, "I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time, and all I get is abuse, the existence of a hunted man." Even the most hardened criminals rarely blame themselves for anything. They rationalize their behavior. They tell themselves that they are protecting their own, or that society forced their hand. If desperate men behind prison walls do not blame themselves for anything, what about the people you interact with every day? The person who cuts you off in traffic, the employee who turns in sloppy work, or the spouse who forgets an anniversary? None of them are walking around thinking, "I am a villain." They are all the heroes of their own stories. They all have reasons, however illogical, for their actions. This brings us to a critical realization about human relations. Criticism is futile. It is futile because it puts a person on the defensive and usually makes them strive to justify themselves. Criticism is dangerous because it wounds a person's precious pride, hurts their sense of importance, and arouses resentment. When you criticize someone, you're not acting like a teacher correcting a math problem. You're acting like a threat to their ego. B.F. Skinner, the world-famous psychologist, proved through his experiments that an animal rewarded for good behavior will learn much more rapidly and retain what it learns far more effectively than an animal punished for bad behavior. Later studies have shown that this applies to humans as well. By criticizing, we do not make lasting changes and often incur resentment. Consider a safety coordinator on a construction site who sees workers without their hard hats. His natural instinct is to assert authority. He might yell, "Hey, put those hats on. Don't you know the regulations?" What happens? The workers might sullenly comply while he is watching, but the moment he leaves, the hats come off. They feel disrespected. Their pride is wounded. Now imagine a different approach. The coordinator sees the men without hats. He approaches them with a smile. He asks if the hats are uncomfortable or if the size is wrong. He reminds them in a pleasant tone that the hat is designed to protect them from injury and suggests that it always be worn on the job. There is no challenge to their authority, no insult to their intelligence. The result is increased compliance with no resentment. The desire to criticize is often just a way for us to vent our own frustration. It feels good to tell someone off. It makes us feel superior. But if our goal is to actually change behavior or improve a relationship, criticism is the equivalent of trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It creates a flash of heat, but it ends in destruction. To handle people effectively, you must master your own temper. It takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving. Instead of condemning people, try to understand them. Try to figure out why they do what they do. That is a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. As the old saying goes, to know all is to forgive all. Chapter 2. The Big Secret of Dealing with People. There is only one way under high heaven to get anybody to do anything. Have you ever stopped to think of that? Yes, just one way. And that is by making the other person want to do it. You can force a child to practice piano by threatening them. You can make an employee stay late by threatening to fire them. But these crude methods have sharp repercussions. The only sustainable way to get results is to give the other person what they want. So what do people want? Not many things, but the few things that they do wish, they crave, with an insistence that will not be denied. We want health, food, sleep, money, and sexual gratification. But there is one longing, almost as deep, almost as imperious as the desire for food or sleep, which is seldom gratified. It is what Freud calls the desire to be great. It is what John Dewey calls the desire to be important. This desire for a feeling of importance is one of the chief distinguishing differences between mankind and animals. It is this urge that led an uneducated grocery clerk to study law books he found in the bottom of a barrel of household plunder. That grocery clerk was Abraham Lincoln. It is this desire that inspires people to wear the latest styles, drive the latest cars, and talk about their brilliant children. It is this desire that lures many young people into joining gangs. They want a status, a name, a place where they matter. If you tell me how you get your feeling of importance, I will tell you what you are. That determines your character. Some people get their feeling of importance by giving money to charity to build a hospital. Others get it by robbing a bank. The drive is the same, only the method differs. Since this hunger for importance is so deep, imagine the power you hold in your hands if you can satisfy it for others. The way to develop the best that is in a person is by appreciation and encouragement. There is nothing else that so kills the ambitions of a person as criticisms from superiors. We should never criticize anyone. We should believe in giving a person incentive to work. We should be anxious to praise but loath to find fault. Many people confuse this with flattery, but there is a massive difference. Flattery is shallow, selfish, and insincere. It ought to fail, and it usually does. Appreciation is sincere. It comes from the heart out, not the teeth out. Flattery is telling the other person precisely what they think about themselves. Appreciation is seeing the good in them that they may not even see themselves. In our modern marriages and workplaces, we often suffer from a famine of appreciation. We take the good for granted and focus entirely on the bad. A wife might cook 500 excellent meals and never hear a word, but let her burn the toast once, and she will hear about it for a week. A clerk might process 1,000 transactions perfectly, but make one error, and the boss is at their desk. This is backward. Try leaving a friendly trail of little sparks of gratitude on your daily trips. You will be surprised how they will set small flames of friendship that will be rose beacons on your next visit. Thank the postal worker for their speed. Compliment the waitress on her smile. Notice the effort your partner put into their appearance. We nourish the bodies of our children and friends and employees, but how seldom do we nourish their self-esteem? We provide them with roast beef and potatoes to build energy, but we neglect to give them kind words of appreciation that would sing in their memories for years, like the music of the morning stars. Honest appreciation is the legal tender that all souls enjoy. It is an investment that pays dividends in loyalty, productivity, and love. Chapter 3. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. I often went fishing up in Maine during the summer. Personally, I am very fond of strawberries and cream, but I have found that for some strange reason, fish prefer worms. So when I went fishing, I didn't think about what I wanted. I didn't bait the hook with strawberries and cream. Rather, I dangled a worm or a grasshopper in front of the fish and said, "Wouldn't you like to have that?" Why not use the same common sense when fishing for people? This is the most common mistake in human relations. We talk about what we want. We preach to our children about why we want them to study. We tell our customers why we need the sale. We tell our boss why we need a raise. But here is the brutal truth. Nobody else is interested in you. They are not interested in me. They are interested in themselves. Morning, noon, and after dinner. The only way on earth to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. Consider a situation where a father is trying to get his young son to stop smoking. The usual method is for the father to lecture the boy. It's bad for your health. I don't want you doing it. It costs too much money. These are all things the father cares about. The boy doesn't care about lung cancer 30 years from now. He cares about today. He cares about his status. If the father is smart, he will bait the hook with the worm, not the strawberries. He might say, "Son, I know you want to make the basketball team this year. You know that sprinters and athletes need maximum lung capacity to outrun the competition. Cigarettes cut your wind. If you smoke, you're giving the other team an advantage over you. If you want to be the star player, you have to protect your lungs." Now you are talking about what he wants. Now you have his attention. This applies to business just as much as parenting. Thousands of salespeople are pounding the pavements today, tired, discouraged, and underpaid. Why? Because they are always thinking only of what they want. They do not realize that neither you nor I want to buy anything. If we did, we would go out and buy it. But both of us are eternally interested in solving our problems, and if salespeople can show us how their services or merchandise will help us solve our problems, they won't need to sell us. We'll buy. And a customer likes to feel that he is buying, not being sold. Looking at the other person's point of view and arousing in him an eager want for something is not to be construed as manipulating that person so that he will do something that is only for your benefit and his detriment. Each party should gain from the negotiation. Consider a job interview. Most cover letters start with, "I need a job," or "I have these degrees." The employer doesn't care. They have a problem, a pile of work and nobody to do it. A successful applicant talks about the employer's problem. "I see you are expanding into a new market. I have done market research in that specific sector that could save you 6 months of trial and error." Now the employer is listening. You have aligned your desire, getting a job, with their eager want, saving time and money. Henry Ford once said, "If there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle, as well as from your own." It sounds simple, yet 90% of people ignore it 90% of the time. We are locked in the boxes of our own desires. The person who can step out of their own ego, walk around the table, and look at the world through the eyes of another has a massive advantage. They have the key to unlocking cooperation, enthusiasm, and influence. First, arouse in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. Part 2. 6 Ways to Make People Like You. Chapter 1. Do this and you will be welcome anywhere. Why should people be interested in you unless you are first interested in them? This is the fundamental question that destroys the social strategy of most people. We spend our lives trying to impress others. We wear expensive clothes, drive flashy cars, and curate our social media profiles to show how fascinating, successful, and busy we are. We think that if we can just prove our worth, people will flock to us. But this is a biological error. People are not thinking about you. They are not thinking about me. They are thinking about themselves. They are thinking about their toothache, their bank account, and their hairline. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. Consider the dog. It is the only animal that does not have to work for a living. A hen has to lay eggs, a cow has to give milk, and a canary has to sing. But a dog makes his living by giving you nothing but love. When you come home, the dog goes wild with joy. He doesn't want to sell you a used car. He doesn't want to borrow money. He just wants to be with you. And because of that pure, unadulterated interest in your presence, you love him back. Alfred Adler, the famous Viennese psychologist, wrote that it is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men, who has the greatest difficulties in life and provides the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failures spring. If you want to be a writer, your stories will be dull if you do not like people. If you are a salesman, you will starve if you view your prospects as merely wallets with legs. This principle was the secret weapon of Howard Thurston, a famous magician. He didn't just have good sleight of hand, he had a love for his audience. He told stories of other magicians who would look at the audience and say to themselves that there was a bunch of suckers out there. Thurston did the opposite. Before he went on stage, he would whisper to himself that he loved his audience and was grateful they were there. It sounds cheesy, but it changed his micro-expressions, his tone and his energy. The audience felt the warmth and responded in kind. In a modern business context, genuine interest is the ultimate networking tool. We often approach networking events with a stack of business cards and a rehearsed elevator pitch, looking for someone who can help us. This is predatory. Instead, try approaching a stranger with the sole intent of finding out what makes them tick. Ask about their projects, their history, their passions. There was a sales representative who had been trying to sell fuel to a large chain store organization for years without success. He finally decided to stop trying to sell and start trying to be interested. He found out the executive he was targeting was deeply involved in a debate about the benefits of chain stores to the community. The salesman researched the topic not to sell fuel, but to offer support to the executive's cause. When he visited, he didn't mention his product once. He talked about the executive's passion. The executive talked for 2 hours, glowing with pride. At the end, without being asked, the executive placed an order for the fuel. The salesman had unlocked the door not by pushing, but by pulling the lever of genuine interest. If we want to make friends, let's put ourselves out to do things for other people, things that require time, energy, unselfishness, and thoughtfulness. Ask a colleague about their sick mother, and remember to ask again next week. Research the hobbies of the client you are meeting. Be the person who remembers the birthday that everyone else forgot. Chapter 2. A simple way to make a good first impression. Actions speak louder than words, and a smile says, "I like you, you make me happy, I'm glad to see you." This is why dogs make such a hit. It is why we smile back at a baby. The effect of a smile is powerful, even when it is unseen. Telephone companies have programs where they train employees to smile when talking on the phone. Why? Because your smile comes through in your voice. It changes the tenor of the conversation from transactional to human. You might say, "I don't feel like smiling." Then you must force yourself to smile. If you are alone, force yourself to whistle or hum a tune or sing. Act as if you were already happy, and that will tend to make you happy. This is a psychological truth identified by William James. Action seems to follow feeling, but really, action and feeling go together. By regulating the action, which is under the direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not. Consider the environment of a typical office or waiting room. Everyone is buried in their phones, avoiding eye contact, wearing masks of indifference or stress. If you walk into that room and offer a genuine warm smile to the receptionist or the person next to you, you change the chemical composition of the room. You become a source of light. There was a stockbroker in New York who was known as a grouch. He rarely smiled at his wife and never at his employees. He decided to try this principle. He looked in the mirror one morning and told himself to wipe the scowl off his face. He smiled at his wife at breakfast. He smiled at the doorman. He smiled at the subway clerk. He smiled at the traders on the floor. The result? He found that people smiled back. His home life became happier. His business revenue increased because people actually wanted to do business with him. A smile is not just a facial expression, it is an economic asset. In a world where products and services are increasingly commoditized, the feeling you give a customer is the only true differentiator. If a customer has to choose between 2 identical vendors, they will choose the one who makes them feel welcome. However, a warning is necessary. An insincere grin? No. That doesn't fool anybody. We know it is mechanical, and we resent it. We are talking about a real smile, a heartwarming smile, a smile that comes from within, the kind of smile that will bring a good price in the marketplace. To smile like this, you have to actually like people. You have to cultivate a joyful attitude. You have to realize that everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle, and your smile might be the only kindness they receive that day. Chapter 3. If you don't do this, you are headed for trouble. The average person is more interested in his or her own name than in all the other names on earth put together. Remember that name and call it easily, and you have paid a subtle and very effective compliment. But forget it or misspell it, and you have placed yourself at a sharp disadvantage. A name is not just a label. It is a person's identity. It is the sound that sets them apart from the crowd. When you use someone's name, you are acknowledging their unique existence. You are saying, "I see you. You matter." Jim Farley was a man who never saw the inside of a high school, but became the Postmaster General of the United States and the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. What was the secret of his success? He could call 50,000 people by their first names. He understood that the sweetest and most important sound in any language is a person's name. Before a political campaign, he would send personal letters to people he had met months or years before, addressing them by name, asking about their families. This built a loyal army of supporters. Andrew Carnegie, the Steel King, knew almost nothing about the technical manufacture of steel, but he knew how to handle people. When he was a boy, he got hold of a mother rabbit. Soon he had a whole nest of little rabbits and nothing to feed them. He had a brilliant idea. He told the boys in the neighborhood that if they would go out and pull enough clover and dandelions to feed the rabbits, he would name the bunnies in their honor. The plan worked like magic. Years later, he used the same psychology in business. He wanted to sell steel rails to the Pennsylvania Railroad. The president of the railroad was J. Edgar Thompson. So Carnegie built a huge steel mill in Pittsburgh and called it the Edgar Thompson Steel Works. When the Pennsylvania Railroad needed steel rails, where do you think J. Edgar Thompson bought them? We often make excuses for not remembering names. We say we are too busy, or we have a bad memory. But we are probably no busier than Franklin D. Roosevelt, and he took time to remember and recall even the names of mechanics with whom he came into contact. It requires effort. It requires concentration. It requires the will to repeat the name and fix it in your mind. In business, this is critical. If you run a cafe, greeting a regular by name makes them feel like they are part of a community, not just a transaction. If you are a manager, knowing the names of your employees' children shows that you view them as human beings. Even in high-stakes corporate warfare, names matter. When Carnegie was battling George Pullman for the sleeping car business, the two were cutting prices and destroying their own profits. Carnegie met Pullman one evening and suggested they merge. Pullman listened but wasn't convinced until he asked what the new company would be called. Carnegie replied instantly, "The Pullman Palace Car Company, of course." Pullman's face brightened and a deal was made. Carnegie sacrificed his own ego to feed Pullman's, using the power of the name to win the war. Using a person's name is the easiest, most effective way to gain goodwill. Conversely, misspelling a name in an email or forgetting a name during an introduction is a silent signal that says, "You are not important enough for me to remember." Make a habit of using the name. When you meet someone, ask how to spell it. Use it in conversation. Use it when you say goodbye. Chapter 4. An easy way to become a good conversationalist. Many people harbor a profound misconception about what it takes to be a great conversationalist. They believe they need to be witty, well-read, and capable of dominating a room with fascinating stories. They think conversation is a performance where they are the star and everyone else is the audience. This could not be further from the truth. The most effective conversationalist is often the person who says the least. Consider a scenario where a young, aspiring professional attends a high society dinner party. He sits next to a distinguished botanist. The young man knows nothing about plants, but he knows how to ask questions. He sits on the edge of his chair and listens as the botanist talks for hours about exotic flowers and indoor gardens. At the end of the night, the botanist tells the host that the young man was the most stimulating conversationalist he had ever met. The young man had barely spoken. He had done something far more powerful. He had listened. This works because the people you are talking to are 100 times more interested in themselves and their wants and problems than they are in you and your problems. A person's toothache means more to that person than a famine in a foreign land that kills 1 million people. A boil on one's neck interests one more than 40 earthquakes in Africa. Think of that the next time you start a conversation. Most people trying to win others to their way of thinking do too much talking themselves. They try to force their opinions into the minds of others. This is a mistake. Let the other people talk themselves out. They know more about their business and problems than you do. So ask them questions, let them tell you a few things. If you disagree with them, you may be tempted to interrupt. But don't. It is dangerous. They won't pay attention to you while they still have a lot of ideas of their own crying for expression. So listen patiently and with an open mind. Be sincere about it. Encourage them to express their ideas fully. This principle is vital in business. There was a department store that almost lost a loyal customer because a clerk refused to listen to a complaint about a coat. The customer tried to explain that the lining was torn, but the clerk interrupted, citing store policy and refusing to hear the full story. The customer was ready to vow never to return. Then the manager arrived. The manager did not speak. She listened. She let the customer vent her frustration entirely. Only after the customer felt heard did the manager offer a solution. The customer left satisfied, not because the policy changed, but because she was validated. To be interesting, you must be interested. Ask questions that the other person will enjoy answering. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Remember that the man talking to you about his ragged rug is far more interested in his rug than he is in the outcome of the next election. If you want to know how to make people shun you and laugh at you behind your back and even despise you, here is the recipe. Never listen to anyone for long. Talk incessantly about yourself. If you have an idea while the other person is talking, don't wait for him or her to finish. Bust right in and interrupt in the middle of a sentence. Do you know people like that? They are bores, intoxicated with their own egos, drunk with a sense of their own importance. People who talk only of themselves think only of themselves. And those who think only of themselves are hopelessly uneducated. Chapter 5. How to interest people. If you want to win a person to your way of thinking, you must first capture their interest. But how do you do that when everyone has different hobbies, backgrounds, and desires? The secret is preparation. The royal road to a person's heart is to talk about the things he or she treasures most. Theodore Roosevelt, one of the most charismatic leaders in history, knew this secret well. Whenever Roosevelt expected a visitor, he sat up late the night before, reading up on the subject in which he knew his guest was particularly interested. Whether the guest was a cowboy, a politician, or a diplomat, Roosevelt knew what to say. He knew that to build a bridge to another person, you must start on their side of the river. This is not just for presidents. It is a tactical advantage in the business world. Take the example of a man named Mr. Duvernoy, who was trying to sell bread to a hotel in New York. He had called on the manager every week for 4 years without success. He decided to change his tactics. He found out that the manager was deeply involved in a society of hotel executives called the Hotel Greeters of America. He was not just a member, he was the president. The next time Mr. Duvernoy visited, he didn't talk about bread, he didn't talk about prices. He started talking about the hotel greeters. The manager lit up. He talked for half an hour about the society with vibrancy and enthusiasm. It was his passion. Mr. Duvernoy left without even mentioning his product. But the next day, the hotel's steward called him and placed an order. For 4 years he had drummed at the door to no avail, but the moment he talked in terms of the other person's interests, the door opened wide. This principle requires you to step outside your own ego. We are naturally inclined to talk about what we know and what we care about. It takes effort to research another person's interests. It takes discipline to steer the conversation toward their passions rather than your own. But the payoff is immense. Imagine you are applying for a job at a company that is obsessed with innovation. Do not walk into the interview and talk about your need for a salary or your desire for stability. Talk about their recent patents. Talk about the market trends they are capitalizing on. Show them that you are aligned with their world. This applies to social situations as well. If you are visiting a friend who loves stamp collecting, do not bore them with stories about your golf game. Ask to see their collection. Ask what makes a particular stamp valuable. You might be bored by stamps, but you will be fascinated by the transformation in your friend. They will come alive, they will feel understood, and they will associate that positive feeling with you. Chapter 6. How to make people like you instantly. There is one all-important law of human conduct. If we obey that law, we shall almost never get into trouble. In fact, that law, if obeyed, will bring us countless friends and constant happiness. But the very instant we break the law, we shall get into endless trouble. The law is this: always make the other person feel important. John Dewey said that the desire to be important is the deepest urge in human nature. William James said that the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. This urge is what differentiates us from the animals. It is the urge that has been responsible for civilization itself. You want the approval of those with whom you come in contact. You want recognition of your true worth. You want a feeling that you are important in your little world. You don't want to listen to cheap, insincere flattery, but you do crave sincere appreciation. You want your friends and associates to be hearty in their approbation and lavish in their praise. All of us want that. So let's obey the golden rule and give unto others what we would have others give unto us. How? When? Where? The answer is all the time. Everywhere. I was once waiting in line at the post office. The clerk looked bored, shuffling envelopes and weighing packages in a monotonous routine. I decided to try to make him like me. I asked myself, what is there about him that I can honestly admire? I looked at him and saw he had a magnificent head of hair, so I said to him, I sure wish I had your head of hair. He looked up, half startled, his face beaming with smiles. He said, well, it isn't as good as it used to be. I assured him it was still magnificent. We had a pleasant conversation, and he told me that many people admired his hair. I bet that man went home that night and told his wife about it. I bet he looked in the mirror and felt good about himself. Some might ask, what did you want to get out of him? That question reveals a poverty of spirit. If we are so contemptibly selfish that we can't radiate a little happiness and pass on a bit of honest appreciation without trying to get something out of the other person in return, we shall meet with the failure we so richly deserve. Little phrases such as, I'm sorry to trouble you. Would you be so kind as to, won't you please? Would you mind? And thank you are the little courtesies that oil the cogs of the monotonous grind of everyday life. They are the hallmark of good breeding. This principle works in the most hostile environments. A man named Hall Caine was the son of a blacksmith who became the richest literary man of his time. How? He wrote a letter to a famous poet, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, praising his artistic achievement. Rossetti was delighted. He thought, any young man who has such an exalted opinion of my ability must be brilliant. He invited Caine to London and became his mentor. Caine's entire life changed because he took the time to make someone else feel important. In your daily life, you interact with waitresses, clerks, and bus drivers who are often treated as invisible machinery. Try treating them as royalty. Validate their dignity. If a waitress makes a mistake, do not berate her. Say, I know you are busy, and it's hard to keep track of everything, but you will see a transformation. Almost all the people you meet feel themselves superior to you in some way, and a sure way to their hearts is to let them realize in some subtle way that you recognize their importance and recognize it sincerely. Talk to people about themselves and they will listen for hours. Part 3. How to win people to your way of thinking. Chapter 1. You can't win an argument. The most common and destructive mistake people make in communication is the attempt to win an argument. We have all been there. Someone makes a claim that is factually incorrect and our ego flares up. We feel a burning compulsion to correct them, to show them the facts, to prove our intellectual superiority. We think that if we can just lay out the logic clearly enough, they will bow down and admit defeat. But this is a fantasy. I learned this lesson the hard way during a banquet in London. I was sitting next to a man who told a humorous story that hinged on a quotation. He claimed the quote was from the Bible. I knew for a fact with absolute certainty that it was from Shakespeare. Motivated by a desire to display my importance, I corrected him. He stuck to his guns. He was sure it was the Bible. An old friend of mine, who was a Shakespearean scholar, was sitting on my other side. I turned to him to settle the dispute. My friend kicked me under the table and said that the storyteller was right and that it was from the Bible. Later that night, as we were driving home, I asked my friend why he had lied. He replied that of course it was Shakespeare, but we were guests at a festive occasion. Why prove a man wrong? Why make him feel uncomfortable? Is that going to make him like you? This incident taught me a lesson that has saved me thousands of headaches. You cannot win an argument. You cannot, because if you lose it, you lose it. And if you win it, you lose it. Why? Suppose you triumph over the other person and shoot their argument full of holes and prove that they are mentally incompetent. Then what? You will feel fine. But what about them? You have made them feel inferior. You have hurt their pride. They will resent your triumph. A person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. In the world of sales, this is a fatal error. Patrick J. O'Hare was a man who loved to fight. He had little education and a lot of Irish temper. He became a truck salesman, but he was starving because he argued with every prospect. If a customer said the truck was no good, Pat would get red in the face and tell them why they were wrong. Pat won a lot of arguments, but he sold very few trucks. He often walked out of an office saying that he had told that guy a thing or two, but he had not sold him a thing. My task was not to teach Pat how to talk, but how to keep his mouth shut. Once he stopped arguing, he became one of the top salesmen for the White Motor Company. If a customer said a competitor's truck was better, Pat would simply agree. He would say that the competitor made a fine truck and was a good company. This stopped the argument dead. There was nothing left to say. Then Pat could begin talking about the good points of his own truck. The analysis here is simple but profound. When you argue, you trigger the backfire effect. This is a psychological phenomenon where presenting contradictory evidence actually strengthens a person's original belief. By attacking their position, you force them to entrench themselves to protect their identity. To win people to your way of thinking, you must avoid arguments as you would avoid rattlesnakes and earthquakes. Chapter 2. A sure way of making enemies and how to avoid it. If you want to make enemies, there is a very simple recipe. Just tell people they are wrong. You can do it with a look, an intonation, or a gesture, just as eloquently as you can in words. And if you tell them they are wrong, do you make them want to agree with you? Never. You have struck a direct blow at their intelligence, judgment, pride, and self-respect. That will make them want to strike back. It will never make them want to change their minds. You may hurl at them all the logic of Plato or Immanuel Kant, but you will not alter their opinions, for you have hurt their feelings. Never begin by announcing that you are going to prove something to someone. That is tantamount to saying that you are smarter than they are and you are going to teach them a lesson. That is a challenge. It arouses opposition and makes the listener want to battle with you before you even start. It is difficult enough to change minds under the most benign conditions. Why make it harder? If you are going to prove anything, do it so subtly and adroitly that no one will feel that you are doing it. Alexander Pope expressed this perfectly when he said that men must be taught as if you taught them not, and things unknown proposed as things forgot. Galileo said you cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him to find it within himself. If a person makes a statement that you think is wrong, yes, even that you know is wrong, it is much better to begin by saying, "Well, now look, I thought otherwise, but I may be wrong, I frequently am. And if I am wrong, I want to be put right. Let us examine the facts." There is magic in those phrases. I may be wrong. I frequently am. Let us examine the facts. No one in the heavens above or on the earth beneath will ever object to you saying that you might be wrong. It stops all argument and inspires your opponent to be just as fair and open and broad-minded as you are. It makes them want to admit that they, too, may be wrong. I once knew a young attorney who was arguing a case before the United States Supreme Court. The case involved a statute of limitations. One of the judges asked him if the statute was 6 years. The attorney stopped, stared at the judge, and bluntly said, "Your Honor, there is no statute of limitations in admiralty." The courtroom fell silent. The temperature seemed to drop to 0. The attorney was right and the judge was wrong. But did that make the judge friendly? No. The attorney had made the enormous blunder of telling a very learned and famous man that he was wrong. He had humiliated him. Few people are logical. Most of us are prejudiced and biased. Most of us are blighted with preconceived notions, jealousy, suspicion, fear, envy, and pride. When you tell someone they are wrong, you are not fighting their logic. You are fighting their ego. In a business context, this is vital for customer service. If a customer complains, and you immediately point out where they are wrong, you lose them. Even if you win the factual debate, you lose the customer. By admitting that you might be wrong, or at least validating their perspective, you disarm them. You turn a confrontation into a collaboration. Chapter 3. If you are wrong, admit it. There is a specific kind of courage that is rare in modern society. It is the courage to admit when you have messed up. Most people instinctively defend themselves when they are accused of a mistake. They make excuses. They blame the computer, the traffic, or their co-workers. This is the behavior of a child. To become a leader, one must rise above the herd and admit one's mistakes quickly and emphatically. I used to walk my dog Rex in a park near my home. Rex was a friendly little bulldog, and since we rarely met anyone, I often took him without a leash or a muzzle. One day we encountered a mounted policeman who was itching to show his authority. He scolded me for not muzzling the dog and threatened to fine me if he caught me again. I promised to obey. I tried, but Rex hated the muzzle. So, I took a chance. A few days later, I saw the same policeman. I didn't wait for him to start speaking. I beat him to it. I said, "Officer, you caught me red-handed. I have no alibis, no excuses. You warned me last week that if I brought this dog out here again without a muzzle, you would fine me." The policeman's reaction was immediate. He softened. He said, "Well, I know it is a temptation to let a little dog run. I insisted that I was wrong." He insisted that I was being too hard on myself. He ended up letting me go with a warning. Why did this happen? The policeman, being human, wanted a feeling of importance. When I began to condemn myself, the only way he could nourish his self-esteem was to take the magnanimous attitude of showing mercy. But suppose I had tried to defend myself. Suppose I had argued. We all know how that conversation would have ended. When you are right, try to win people gently and tactfully to your way of thinking. But when you are wrong, and that will be surprisingly often if you are honest with yourself, admit your mistakes quickly and with enthusiasm. It is much easier to listen to self-criticism than to bear condemnation from alien lips. This principle works wonders in personal relationships. Imagine a husband and wife arguing. One of them realizes they made a mistake. If they dig in their heels, the fight lasts all night. If they simply say, "I was wrong, I messed up, and I'm sorry," the fight evaporates instantly. There is nothing left to fight about. Even in the high-stakes world of history, this principle applies. Robert E. Lee is revered not just for his military tactics, but for his character. After the disastrous charge at Gettysburg, where thousands of his men were slaughtered, he rode out to meet the returning troops. He could have blamed his generals. He could have blamed the cavalry for not arriving in time. Instead, he said, "All this has been my fault. I and I alone have lost this battle." Few generals in all of history have had the courage and character to admit that. By admitting your error, you not only clear the air, you often solve the problem created by the error. People are far more willing to help you fix a mess if you own it first. It builds trust, it shows integrity, and surprisingly, it usually results in the other person defending you or minimizing the error, just as the policeman did for me. Chapter 4. A drop of honey. If your temper is aroused and you tell someone a thing or two, you might have a fine time unloading your feelings. But what about the other person? Will they share your pleasure? Will your belligerent tones and hostile attitude make it easy for them to agree with you? Woodrow Wilson once said that if you come at him with your fists doubled, he would promise you that his would double as fast as yours. But if you come to him and suggest sitting down and taking counsel together, you will likely find that you are not so far apart after all. This is the principle of the drop of honey. It is an old and true maxim that a drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall. If you want to win a man to your cause, first convince him that you are his sincere friend. That is the drop of honey that catches his heart, which is the high road to his reason. History offers a stark example of this in the life of John D. Rockefeller, Jr. In 1915, he was the most fiercely despised man in Colorado. A bloody strike had been raging at the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company for 2 years. Miners were demanding higher wages, and the situation had turned violent. Troops had been called out and strikers had been shot. The air was seething with hatred. Rockefeller wanted to win the strikers to his way of thinking. He didn't do it by shouting or debating. He spent weeks making friends with the miners. He then addressed their representatives. He didn't start with facts or logic. He started with friendliness. He spoke of his pride in being there. He spoke of visiting their homes and meeting their wives and children. He established a bond of mutual friendship. The result was a masterpiece. The miners went back to work without saying another word about the wage increase they had fought so violently for. In our daily lives, we often forget this. When we want to get a rent reduction, or complain about a bill or correct a subordinate, we lead with aggression. We think that showing our teeth will get results. It usually only gets resistance. Consider a man who wanted to get his rent reduced. He knew his landlord was hard-boiled and difficult. Instead of sending a nasty letter or threatening to move, he invited the landlord over. When the landlord arrived, the tenant didn't start with the rent. He started with genuine praise. He complimented the landlord on the way he ran the building. He told him he wanted to stay another year but simply couldn't afford it. The landlord was stunned. He was used to tenants complaining and demanding. Here was a tenant radiating goodwill. The landlord not only lowered the rent, but offered to redecorate the apartment. The psychology here is clear. When a person feels attacked, they dig in. Their self-esteem demands that they defend their position. But when you approach them with gentleness and friendliness, you disarm them. You remove the need for defense. You make it safe for them to agree with you. The sun can make you take off your coat more quickly than the wind. Kindliness and appreciation can make people change their minds more readily than all the bluster and storming in the world. Chapter 5. The Secret of Socrates. In talking with people, do not begin by discussing the things on which you differ. Begin by emphasizing the things on which you agree. Keep emphasizing, if possible, that you are both striving for the same end and that your only difference is one of method and not of purpose. The goal is to get the other person saying yes, yes at the outset. Keep your opponent, if possible, from saying no. This is not just a trick of speech. It is a biological reality. When a person says no and really means it, they are doing far more than saying a word of 2 letters. The entire organism gathers itself together into a condition of rejection. The neuromuscular system sets itself on guard against acceptance. Conversely, when a person says yes, none of the withdrawal activities take place. The organism is in a forward-moving, accepting, open attitude. Therefore, the more yeses we can induce at the very start, the more likely we are to succeed in capturing the attention for our ultimate proposal. It is like the movement of a billiard ball. Propel it in one direction, and it takes some force to deflect it, far more force to send it back in the opposite direction. Socrates was one of the greatest philosophers the world has ever known. He did something that only a handful of men in all history have been able to do. He sharply changed the whole course of human thought. His method was not to tell people they were wrong. It was to ask questions. He asked questions with which his opponent would have to agree. He kept on winning one admission after another. He kept on asking questions until finally, almost without realizing it, his opponents found themselves embracing a conclusion they would have bitterly denied a few minutes previously. This technique is invaluable in business. There was a sales representative for Westinghouse who was trying to sell motors to a difficult engineer. The engineer bought a few motors, but then refused to buy more, claiming they were too hot to touch. The salesman knew that arguing would be futile. He decided to use the yes-yes technique. He asked the engineer about the regulations. The regulations say a motor can run 72 degrees Fahrenheit above room temperature, is that correct? The engineer said yes. And the mill room is about 75 degrees, right? The engineer said yes. So if you add 75 and 72, you get 147 degrees. Wouldn't you scald your hand if you held it under a tap of water at 147 degrees? The engineer had to say yes. Well, the salesman suggested, wouldn't it be a good idea to keep your hands off those motors? The engineer conceded the point. The salesman had won, not by proving the engineer wrong, but by leading him down a path of agreement. By getting the other person to agree with you on small points, you establish a pattern of assent. You show them that you are reasonable and that you understand their reality. This lowers the barrier to the larger request. The next time you are tempted to tell someone they are wrong, remember old Socrates and ask a gentle question. a question that will get the yes, yes response. Chapter 6. The safety valve in handling complaints. Most people trying to win others to their way of thinking do too much talking themselves. They try to force their ideas onto the other person. They dominate the conversation. This is a fatal error, especially when dealing with complaints or conflicts. Let the other people talk themselves out. They know more about their business and problems than you do. So ask them questions. Let them tell you a few things. If you disagree with them, you may be tempted to interrupt. But don't. It is dangerous. They won't pay attention to you while they still have a lot of ideas of their own crying for expression. So listen patiently and with an open mind. Be sincere about it. Encourage them to express their ideas fully. This principle acts as a safety valve. When a person is angry or dissatisfied, they are like a balloon under pressure. If you try to argue, you are squeezing the balloon. It might pop. But if you let them talk, you are untying the knot and letting the air out slowly. Once the pressure is relieved, they can listen to reason. This applies powerfully in the domestic sphere. Many parents constantly lecture their children. They tell them to clean their rooms, study harder, or dress better. They rarely listen. One mother decided to stop talking and start listening to her rebellious teenage daughter. When the daughter came home after disobeying a rule, instead of screaming, the mother simply asked why. She let the girl talk. She listened without judgment. She realized that her daughter didn't need a boss, she needed a confidant. By letting the daughter talk herself out, the relationship was healed. In the corporate world, this is the secret to high-level negotiations. A representative for a textile manufacturer arrived at a meeting with a major auto company completely voiceless due to laryngitis. He had to write on a pad that he couldn't speak. The president of the auto company offered to speak for him. The president exhibited the samples and praised their good points. The president argued the representative's case for him against the other executives. Because the representative couldn't talk, he couldn't argue, he couldn't interrupt. He just smiled and nodded. He won the contract, the largest order of his life, simply because he was forced to let the other person do the talking. Even our friends would rather talk to us about their achievements than listen to us boast about ours. When we talk about ourselves, we are center stage. When we listen, we put the spotlight on them. La Rochefoucauld, the French philosopher, said that if you want enemies, excel your friends, but if you want friends, let your friends excel you. To be a great conversationalist and a person of influence, you must curb your own ego. You must resist the urge to jump in with your own story. You must become a vacuum that draws out the other person's thoughts and feelings. When they feel heard, they feel validated. And when they feel validated, they are open to your influence. Chapter 7. How to get cooperation. We all have a natural bias toward our own ideas. We trust the thoughts that we conceive in our own minds far more than the ideas that are handed to us on a silver platter. If this is true, is it not bad judgment to try to ram your opinions down the throats of other people? Is it not wiser to make suggestions and let the other person think out the conclusion? No one likes to feel that they are being sold something or told to do a thing. We much prefer to feel that we are buying of our own accord or acting on our own ideas. We like to be consulted about our wishes, our wants, and our thoughts. This is the psychology of ownership. When a person feels that an idea is theirs, they will fight for it, work for it, and defend it. When they feel it is forced upon them, they will resist it, even if it is a good idea. Consider the case of a sketch artist who was struggling to sell designs to a leading stylist. For years he called on the buyer every week. The buyer always received him but never bought. He would look at the sketches and politely decline. The artist finally realized that he was approaching the situation the wrong way. He was trying to sell. He needed to get the buyer to create. The artist took several unfinished sketches to the buyer's office. He asked the buyer for a favor. He asked the buyer to look at the unfinished work and suggest how they could be finished so that they would be usable. The buyer looked at the sketches for a while and then asked the artist to leave them for a few days. When the artist returned, the buyer offered specific suggestions. The artist took the sketches back to his studio, finished them exactly as the buyer had suggested, and they were all accepted. From then on, the buyer ordered scores of sketches because he felt he was the co-creator of the designs. This principle works just as powerfully in family life. Imagine a family trying to decide where to go on vacation. Usually one parent decides and tries to sell the idea to the rest. This often leads to grumbling and resistance. Instead, imagine asking the children and the spouse for their input months in advance. Ask them what historical sites they want to see or what activities they want to do. When the final plan includes their specific suggestions, they are not just passengers on a trip, they are partners in an adventure. They have buy-in. In the corporate world, this is the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss gives orders. A leader asks for input. When a sales manager wanted to revitalize a discouraged team, he did not lecture them on working harder. He called a meeting and asked them what they expected from him. He wrote their ideas on the board. Then, he asked them what he had a right to expect from them. The team volunteered ideas like loyalty, honesty, and 8 hours of enthusiastic work a day. The meeting ended with a new sense of courage and inspiration because the team had made a moral bargain with their manager. They were following their own rules, not his. If you want to influence people, you must let them feel that the idea is theirs. You must plant the seed and let them nurture it. You must be willing to let them take the credit. This requires humility, but the results are worth the sacrifice of ego. Chapter 8. A formula that will work wonders for you. Remember that other people may be totally wrong, but they do not think so. Do not condemn them. Any fool can do that. Try to understand them. Only wise, tolerant, exceptional people even try to do that. There is a reason why the other person thinks and acts as they do. Ferret out that reason, and you have the key to their actions, perhaps to their personality. Try honestly to put yourself in their place. If you say to yourself that you would feel exactly as they do if you were in their shoes, you will save yourself a lot of time and irritation. You will become interested in the cause of the behavior, which makes you less likely to dislike the effect. This is the cultivation of empathy. Empathy is the ability to step out of your own movie, where you are the protagonist, and step into someone else's movie, where they are the protagonist. In their movie, their actions make perfect sense. They are reacting to their own pressures, their own history, and their own fears. Consider a husband who was annoyed that his wife spent hours working in the garden pulling weeds. He thought it was a waste of time and that the yard looked no better for her efforts. His criticism ruined the evening. Later, he realized his mistake. He tried to look at it from her perspective. She enjoyed the work. It was her way of relaxing. She craved a compliment on her diligence. The next time she went out to pull weeds, he joined her. He helped her. He complimented the yard. The result was a happy evening and a stronger relationship. He had stopped judging her hobby through his lens of efficiency and started seeing it through her lens of enjoyment. In business, this formula is a superpower. Before you write an email, make a phone call, or ask for a favor, pause. Close your eyes. Ask yourself why the other person should want to do what you are asking. What is in it for them? What are their pressures? What are their fears? A credit manager was trying to collect bills from customers who were refusing to pay for car repairs. They claimed the charges were wrong. The credit men had tried arguing, threatening, and asserting that the company was right. This only led to lost customers. A new investigator took a different approach. He went to the customers and listened. He did not say the company was right. He said he wanted to hear their side of the story. He acted as if he were interested only in their car and their satisfaction. He appealed to their sense of fairness. He let them decide what the bill should be. The result was that the customers paid up, often paying the full amount, and remained loyal to the company. The investigator succeeded because he looked at the transaction through the eyes of the customer, not the eyes of the accounting department. Success in dealing with people depends on a sympathetic grasp of the other person's viewpoint. It requires you to delay your natural reaction to push for your own way. It asks you to be a detective of human nature. When you understand the hidden levers that drive a person, you do not need to push, you only need to align. Chapter 9. What everybody wants. 3/4 of the people you will ever meet are hungering and thirsting for sympathy. Give it to them and they will love you. We all have a deep-seated need to be understood and to have our feelings validated. When we are hurt, angry, or frustrated, We do not want logic. We want someone to look us in the eye and say that they understand why we feel that way. There is a magic phrase that can stop arguments, eliminate ill feeling, create goodwill, and make the other person listen attentively. That phrase is this: I do not blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do. You can say this with 100% sincerity because it is true. If you had inherited the other person's body, temperament, and mind, and if you had lived their experiences, you would be exactly who they are, and you would feel exactly as they do. You deserve very little credit for being who you are, and the people who come to you irritated, bigoted, and unreasoning deserve very little discredit for being who they are. This approach works even with the most difficult people. A famous author once made a mistake in a broadcast, mentioning that a certain writer lived in New Hampshire instead of Massachusetts. He received a deluge of hate mail, including a particularly vicious letter from a woman in Philadelphia. His first instinct was to write a stinging reply, but he controlled himself. He realized that if he were that woman, with her background and her obvious passion for accuracy, he might feel the same way. He called her, he apologized. He told her that he understood her frustration and thanked her for taking the time to write. The woman was stunned. She apologized for her tone. She ended up becoming a friend. By sympathizing with her anger, he disarmed her completely. Saul Hurok, the famous music impresario, used this technique with temperamental artists. He managed a world-famous bass singer who was a constant problem. The singer would call on the day of a performance and claim his throat was raw and he could not sing. Hurok did not argue. He did not say the singer was lying. He rushed to the hotel dripping with sympathy. He would agree that it was a pity. He would say that of course the singer could not sing and that he would cancel the engagement, even though it would cost thousands of dollars. This sympathy was what the singer needed. He needed to feel that his ailment was taken seriously. Once he got that validation, he would sigh and say he might feel better later. By the evening, he would be on stage singing. Self-pity for misfortunes, real or imaginary, is in some measure practically a universal practice. The child shows off his bruise to get sympathy. Adults show off their surgical scars and relate the details of their accidents. We all want to be the hero of a tragedy. When you give people the sympathy they crave, you satisfy a deep emotional hunger. You become a safe harbor in a stormy world. Chapter 10. The High Road to Influence. A person usually has two reasons for doing a thing, one that sounds good and a real one. The person will think of the real reason. You do not need to emphasize that. But all of us, being idealist at heart, like to think of motives that sound good. So, in order to change people, appeal to the nobler motives. This principle is based on the assumption that the vast majority of people you meet are honest and want to discharge their obligations. The exceptions to that rule are comparatively few, and I am convinced that the individuals who are inclined to cheat will in most cases react favorably if you make them feel that you consider them honest, upright, and fair. Consider a landlord who had a tenant threatening to break his lease months early. The landlord could have cited the law, threatened a lawsuit, and created a bitter enemy. Instead, he appealed to the tenant's noble self-image. He told the tenant that he had sized him up as a man of his word. He asked the tenant to think it over for a few days, and if he still wanted to move, the landlord would accept it as a final decision and admit his judgment of character was wrong. The tenant stayed. He wanted to be the honorable man the landlord described. When the late Lord Northcliffe found a newspaper using a picture of him that he did not want published, he did not write to the editor, complaining that he disliked the photo. He appealed to a nobler motive. He wrote that his mother did not like it. He appealed to the respect for motherhood found in almost everyone. When John D. Rockefeller wanted to stop photographers from snapping pictures of his children, he did not talk about his own privacy. He appealed to the desire to protect children. He asked them if they knew it was bad for youngsters to get too much publicity. This is not enough on its own, however. In this age of high stimulation, merely stating a truth is not enough. The truth has to be made vivid, interesting, and dramatic. You have to use showmanship. The movies do it, television does it, and you will have to do it if you want attention. Experts in window displays know the power of dramatization. A rat poison manufacturer increased sales 5 times over. simply by putting live rats in a window display. A business consultant who was struggling to get a client to buy market research data stopped arguing about methodology. Instead, he dumped 30 jars of cold cream on the client's desk. Each jar had a tag explaining what the competition was doing. The visual impact was undeniable. The client stopped arguing and started asking questions. If you have an idea, do not just say it. Show it. Make it tactile, make it visual, make it. If you are selling a cleaning product, spill something and clean it up. If you are proposing a new workflow, map it out with colorful charts that show the time saved. Finally, when nothing else works, there is one surefire way to get results. Throw down a challenge. Charles Schwab had a mill manager whose people were not producing their quota of work. The manager had tried coaxing, pushing, and swearing. Nothing worked. Schwab asked for a piece of chalk. He asked the nearest man how many heats his shift had made that day. The man said 6. Schwab chalked a big number 6 on the floor and walked away. When the night shift came in, they saw the 6 and asked what it meant. They were told the big boss had been there and the day shift had made 6 heats. The night shift, wanting to be superior, worked furiously and chalked a big 7 on the floor. The competition was on. That mill soon became the most productive in the company. The way to get things done is to stimulate competition. I do not mean in a sordid, money-getting way, but in the desire to excel. People love the game. They love the chance for self-expression, the chance to prove their worth, to excel, to win. That is what makes foot races and pie-eating contests. It is the desire for a feeling of importance. If you want to motivate spirited people, give them a challenge they cannot resist. Chapter 11. The Art of Leadership and Correction. The true test of a leader is not how they handle success, but how they handle correction. It is easy to praise, it is difficult to criticize without creating resentment. The secret lies in the approach. It is always easier to listen to unpleasant things after we have heard some praise of our good points. A barber lathers a man before he shaves him. When President McKinley was running for office, a prominent Republican wrote a campaign speech he was incredibly proud of. He read it to McKinley. The speech was terrible. It would have raised a storm of criticism. McKinley did not say it was bad. He praised the man's enthusiasm and effort. He told him it was a magnificent speech, but perhaps not quite suitable for this specific occasion. He guided the man to write a new speech without ever wounding his pride. Even the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, used this technique. When General Hooker was failing to lead the Union Army effectively, Lincoln wrote him a letter. He praised Hooker's bravery and military skill. He validated his confidence. Only after laying this foundation of praise did Lincoln gently pivot to the grave faults he needed Hooker to correct. He wrote that there were some things in regard to which he was not quite satisfied. He did not call them failures, he called them things he was not satisfied with. There is a subtle linguistic tool that helps in this process. Many people begin their criticism with sincere praise, followed by the word but, and ending with a critical statement. For example, telling a child they did a great job on their report card, but they need to work harder on algebra. The word but cancels the praise. It makes the praise seem like a manipulative prelude. Replace but with and. Tell the child they did a great job, and if they continue that effort, their algebra grade will go up next term. The praise remains pure, and the correction becomes a continuation of success. Another hallmark of a great leader is the ability to talk about their own mistakes before criticizing the other person. It is not nearly so difficult to listen to a recital of your faults if the person criticizing begins by humbly admitting that they, too, are far from perfect. When I had to correct my young niece who was working as my secretary, I stopped myself. I remembered that I had years of experience and she had none. I told her that she had made a mistake, but it was no worse than many I had made at her age. I told her I had been guilty of so many silly things myself that I had little room to talk. Then I asked if she thought it would have been better to do it a different way. By lowering myself, I raised her up. Furthermore, no one likes to take orders. The resentment caused by a brash order may last a long time, even if the order was given to correct an obviously bad situation. Instead of giving direct orders, ask questions. Do you think this would work? What do you think of this? Maybe if we phrased it this way, it would be better. Asking questions not only makes an order more palatable, it often stimulates the creativity of the person whom you ask. People are more likely to accept an order if they have had a part in the decision that caused the order to be issued. It gives them a sense of ownership. A manager who asks his team, "How can we solve this delay?" will get far more buy-in than a manager who yells, "Work faster." Finally, a leader must let the other person save face. We often ride roughshod over the feelings of others, getting our own way, finding fault, issuing threats, criticizing a child or an employee in front of others, without even considering the hurt to the other person's pride. Whereas a few minutes of thought, a considerate word or two, a genuine understanding of the other person's attitude would go so far toward alleviating the sting. Even if we are right and the other person is definitely wrong, we only destroy ego by causing someone to lose face. As the French aviation pioneer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote, "I have no right to say or do anything that diminishes a man in his own eyes. What matters is not what I think of him, but what he thinks of himself. Hurting a man in his dignity is a crime." Chapter 12. Spurring people to success. We use positive reinforcement to train dogs, yet we use criticism to train people. Why? We should praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. We should be hearty in our approbation and lavish in our praise. When criticism is minimized and praise emphasized, the good things people do will be reinforced and the poorer things will atrophy for lack of attention. This is a basic principle of psychology. Praise is like sunlight to the warm human spirit. We cannot flower and grow without it. This does not mean vague flattery. It means specific praise. When you see a young employee do a specific task well, tell them exactly why it was good. This gives them a standard to live up to. In fact, if you want to improve a person in a certain respect, act as though that particular trait were already one of their outstanding characteristics. Shakespeare said, "Assume a virtue if you have it not." And it might be well to assume and state openly that other people have the virtue you want them to develop. Give them a fine reputation to live up to, and they will make prodigious efforts rather than see you disillusioned. There is an old saying that if you give a dog a bad name, you may as well hang him. But give him a good name and see what happens. When you want to change someone, act as if the trait you are trying to influence is already one of their outstanding characteristics. If you are dealing with a dishonest employee, tell them you know they are trustworthy and that you value their integrity above all else. They will often strive to live up to that perception rather than prove you wrong. Chapter 13. Make the fault seem easy to correct. Tell a child, a spouse, or an employee that they are stupid or dumb at a certain thing, that they have no gift for it, and that they are doing it all wrong, and you have destroyed almost every incentive to try to improve. But use the opposite technique. Be liberal with your encouragement. Make the thing seem easy to do. Let the other person know that you have faith in their ability to do it, that they have an undeveloped flair for it, and they will practice until the dawn comes in the window in order to excel. A bachelor friend of mine, about 40 years old, decided to take dancing lessons. The first teacher he hired told him the truth. She said he was all wrong, that he would have to forget everything and begin all over again. He was disheartened. He had no incentive to go on, so he quit. The next teacher, however, may have lied, but she got results. She told him nonchalantly that his dancing was a bit old-fashioned, perhaps, but the fundamentals were all right, and she assured him he wouldn't have any trouble learning a few new steps. She kept praising the things he did right, and minimizing his errors. She told him he had a natural sense of rhythm. His common sense told him he was a fourth-rate dancer. But deep in his heart, he wanted to believe he had a natural sense of rhythm. That encouragement gave him hope. It made him want to improve. He paid her to say it, but it was worth every penny because it gave him the confidence to learn. We see this principle applied in the lives of great achievers. Ely Culbertson became a world-famous bridge player and author, yet he once believed he had no talent for the game. He was stubborn and asked too many questions. No one wanted to play with him. Then he met a bridge teacher who told him he had the potential to be a genius at the card table. That encouragement alone launched his career. If you want to help others improve, do not emphasize the magnitude of the problem. Minimize it. Tell your child that their math homework is just a matter of learning a few simple tricks, not a mountain they cannot climb. Tell your employee that their error is a minor oversight that can be easily fixed with their intelligence. When you reduce the size of the obstacle in their mind, you increase the size of their confidence. Chapter 14. Making people glad to do what you want. The final test of a leader is the ability to make people happy about doing the thing you suggest. This sounds manipulative, but it is actually the essence of diplomacy. It is about framing a request so that the other person sees a personal benefit or a boost in status. When Napoleon created the Legion of Honor, he distributed 15,000 crosses to his soldiers and made 18 of his generals marshals of France. He called his troops the Grand Army. He was criticized for giving toys to war-hardened veterans. Napoleon replied that men are ruled by toys. This principle works in everyday life just as well as it worked for the Emperor of France. A friend of mine was troubled by boys running across his lawn. He tried coaxing. He tried scolding. Nothing worked. Then he tried giving the worst sinner in the gang a title and a feeling of authority. He made him his detective and put him in charge of keeping all trespassers off the lawn. That solved the problem. The detective built a bonfire in the backyard and threatened to brand any boy who stepped on the lawn. He was happy to do the work because he had been given a feeling of importance. In business, this often involves giving titles or authority. A grocery store manager was having trouble with an employee who was negligent about putting price tags on shelves. Instead of nagging her, he appointed her supervisor of price tag posting for the entire store. This new responsibility and title changed her attitude completely. She performed her duties satisfactorily from then on because she had a reputation to uphold. To apply this effectively, you must follow a few guidelines. Be sincere. Do not promise anything you cannot deliver. Know exactly what it is you want the other person to do. Be empathetic. Ask yourself what it is the other person really wants. Consider the benefits that person will receive from doing what you suggest. Match those benefits to the other person's wants. If you want an employee to stay late to finish a project, do not just order them to stay. Tell them that their contribution is vital to the team's success and that finishing this project will showcase their reliability to the upper management. Frame the request in a way that highlights their importance. This does not guarantee that everyone will always do what you want, but it drastically increases the odds. By focusing on the other person's perspective and desires, you turn a command into an opportunity. You transform resistance into cooperation. Conclusion: the mastery of human relations. We have journeyed through the fundamental techniques of handling people, the ways to make people like you, the methods to win people to your way of thinking, and the principles of leadership. These are not just rules to be memorized. They are a way of life to be practiced. The common thread running through every chapter is the shift from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. It is the realization that every human being you meet is hungry for appreciation, desperate for understanding, and driven by a desire to feel important. When you satisfy these hungers, you do not just get what you want. You add value to the world. You create an environment where people can thrive. You might be thinking that this requires too much effort. It takes time to listen. It takes discipline to control your temper. It takes creativity to frame requests in terms of the other person's interests. You are right, it is hard work. But consider the alternative. Consider the cost of friction, of arguments, of lonely dinners and stalled careers. The price of mastering human relations is small compared to the price of failing at them. Start small. Tomorrow, try to critique no one. Give honest appreciation to 3 people. Smile at everyone you meet. Listen more than you talk. You will see a change in your atmosphere almost immediately. You will find that the world is a friendlier place, not because the world has changed, but because you have. We have covered a massive amount of ground in this summary. To help you cement these ideas, I have one final simple question for you. Which of the principles we discussed do you find the hardest to practice in your daily life, and why do you think that is? Is it smiling when you are tired or admitting when you are wrong? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe for more concise, powerful summaries of the world's best books.